Okay, guys, so welcome to Empowered's next webinar. This is a content-based webinar, so it's demand-generated as voted by you guys in the last BEE Ask-a-thon. We are going to be looking at skills development in particular for the next 30 minutes with you. We're going to run through the first 20 or so odd minutes just with the actual in-depth educational information sharing, and then we will have the last sort of 10 minutes or so reserved for a Q&A. So let me start off by introducing myself. I am Atishka. I head up the customer success department at Empowered Business Solutions. So we're the leg that is really just the service delivery component when procuring a software license from us. So we've got BE professionals that sit within our space that help make the customer's journey with Empowered a success. I am joined by two of my team members that are going to be presenting the webinar for this month. It is Kurt van der Westhuizen and Offense Maduse. She and him have been with Empowered for many years in the customer success space. They're very familiar with our way of work and highly skilled in their BEE expertise. And so they're going to, like I said, be presenting the webinar for today. So I'm going to kick straight into it.
Okay, so let me take over. Thank you, Matishka, and thank you everyone for your time and for joining this webinar session. As Matishka has said, today we are looking into the skills development element of the scorecard, right? The skills development element is somehow related to the management control and employment equity elements. As you will see, one of the measured indicators will have its target based on the number of employees that the business has. Now, while the management control element actually drives true transformation by ensuring or encouraging equality as well as fair representation of all races across different management levels within an entity, we have to acknowledge at some point that when it comes to previously disadvantaged individuals, they are only deserving to be given a fair chance to competing for these management positions, because placing individuals with little or no knowledge in terms of how to successfully fulfill their roles or these management roles, it will have dire consequences where we will see companies performing poorly, also a ripple effect, which will be a negative impact to the country's economy at large, right? So this is where the skills development element plays a role, where it encourages investment in providing required knowledge, the right skills, as well as the appropriate qualifications for these individuals, not only to benefit them, but also to benefit the organizations or entities overall or as a whole. Okay, so we are going to go through the skills development scorecard, the different indicators that are measured, the compliance targets, as well as the weighting points available for each indicator. Okay, so looking at the first indicator for skills development, we are looking at skills development expenditure on learning programs specified in the learning program matrix, right? This is based on a percentage of your leviable amount, and leviable amount is more or less like your salary bill. Or normally how it's calculated is that you take your SDL, so your skills development levy that you pay over to SARS, and multiply it by 100 to get what is then the leviable amount. So here your compliance percentage will be 3.5 of your leviable amount, which will award you 6 points if you do manage to meet that target of spending 3.5 of your leviable amount on training programs for Black people. We then have a look at the second indicator, where you have to spend 2.5% of your leviable amount in sponsoring bursaries for Black students. And bursaries, what would qualify would be learners that are registered or who have enrolled with any institution that is registered by the Department of Higher Education. That's what would qualify as a bursary sponsorship of fund when it comes to the skills development scorecard. right? So 4 available points there if you do meet the target. Then we have an indicator looking at headcount. This is where they measure the number of Black people as a percentage of your total headcount. So total number of employees, 5% of your total number of employees has to be learners that are enrolled in programs like learnerships, apprenticeships, as well as internships. So we are looking specifically at categories B, C, and D when we are talking about the learning program matrix. There we have 6 available points that you can reach if you do meet that target. Skills development has bonus points available, 5 in total, and those bonus points will be awarded if you happen to absorb any of either fixed-term learners or, fixed-term employees or unemployed learners that have been participating in learnership programs, apprenticeships, or internships. If you do happen to absorb 100% of them, or actually the target is based on 5% of your total headcount as well. So in other words, the indicator for number of people participating in these learning programs somehow forces you to make sure that at least 5% of your total headcount is either fixed-term employees or unemployed learners in this case, for you to be able to get the 5 bonus points available. Now, skills development is one of the 3 priority elements of your BEE scorecard. This means that you have a sub-minimum that you need to reach in order for you to avoid being discounted a level. Here, we are looking at 40% of your total skills development points, but this is exclusive of the 5 bonus points available. So they are purely looking at the 20 points that you get on the first 4 indicators, right? Where you need to reach at least 8 points in total for you to meet the sub-minimum. What's important to note here as well is that the first, the second, as well as the 4th indicator of your skills development scorecard is based on your EAP target. So here we are looking at economically active population, where you need to meet specific targets when it comes to the different percentages, either by the province that the company operates purely under, or national targets that are being published by the commissioner's report every year. So overall skills development, 25 points, but like I said, 20 points, you need to meet your sub-minimum of 8 points in total for you to get that sub-minimum. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'll be taking over now. My name is Kurt, like Natishka mentioned earlier. So I'll be taking you through the key principles that's applicable for skills development. We'll start off with the prerequisite for WSP and HER. That's your workplace skills plan and your annual training report. Sorry. Also included in that is your priority skills, your pivotal report, and another key factor is that you have to have priority skills for generally and specifically for your Black staff members. So that's a prerequisite. So if you don't have that, you're not going to be audited by your verification agency, and they will not even look at skills development at all and give you 0 points. Skills can be claimable for employed and unemployed people. What does this mean? So if you got fixed term staff and full-time staff, that is your employed staff. Unemployed people is generally anybody that can be seen that is unemployed and you can claim them for skills development, specifically under the skills development of all people. That is the 3.5% target that Offense just mentioned earlier. Okay, now we're going to look at some claimable costs that you can claim for. Cost for training materials, that's any materials, stationery, and all of those type of things that you can buy. You can claim that cost. Cost of trainers, so this is your training, your SDF, your training manager, your trainers, and your administrators. You can claim for all of them. We'll discuss other limitations on them later on. Cost of training facilities includes catering costs, so you can claim the building that you have and all of that. So that is all part of the training facility costs that you can include. Scholarships and bursaries is claimable also for skills development. Course fees, accommodation, travel, administration costs, that's the ST and training manager costs, like previously mentioned, and the salary portion for category B, C, and D for those months applicable. You can also claim the stipend for your category A spend, and that would be that will also be recognized under skills development under the bursary portion of it. The learning program matrix. So this is very important that you guys need to keep focus on. There is about category A to G that you need to be aware of, and this category basically decides how your claim will run, right? So you need to understand the matrix and understand each part of it, from description, delivery mode, to learning site, to learning achievement. All of this plays a part in it, and you need to be able to house your initiative within that. If you can't house your initiative in that, then the chances are that your claim will not be accepted. So you need to make sure that you meet that criteria. You need to make sure that all agreements tie back to that, because a lot of the things that happen is that if you don't have agreements in place, you normally don't get the points. For example, I've seen a situation where people had a bursary agreement in place, but the bursary agreement didn't comply to the criteria whereby you can only claim back the number of years that the person has studied and not expect that person to work longer than that. And that they kicked out the category A for that whole company because of that. So make sure that your evidence is up to standard. Make sure that you met all the requirements that your verification agency asks for. Otherwise, you will lose out on those points. Okay, bursaries is a fairly new concept within BE. There was previously that you could claim it. Now it's a separate line indicator. So now there has been a drive for bursaries to be done by companies so that they can sponsor bursaries. The bursaries is for higher education people alone. So you need to be aware that it can only bursaries specifically for higher education students. Yeah, you can claim that the cost of that is all claimable that's associated with the bursary, whether it be accommodation, stipends, and all of that. You get a full recognition of it, not like with the other categories where you can be limited on that portion of it. Speaking of capping, your FNG is capped at 25%, and your accommodation and traveling and catering is capped at 15%, so that you can only claim 15% of that of your total skills amount, where FNG is 25% of your total skills amount. Okay. Overhead cost. Overhead cost is the cost associated with the training department that you have gotten there, and that cost, like your accommodation traveling cost, is also limited to the 15%. So also be aware that this limitation could play a factor in how you calculate your scoring. Okay. Mandatory training. Mandatory training will be viewed in light of business operations per industry and not per profession. So basically, if you have legislated criteria that says that you have to do a certain amount of training, then that training cannot be claimed under BEE. If it's profession orientated, whereby you have to say that if you're doing a course and they tell you that you have to register with a certain professional body, that can still be claimable. It's only when it's legislative that you can't claim it, whereby it says, like with health and safety, that you need 1 out of 20 persons to be able to go on a safety rep course. That is legislative law to say that you can't claim that person for going onto that course, and therefore you can't claim it as skills development. Okay, international spend. International spend is when you need to make sure that when you claim international spend that it's SACWA aligned. So you'll need to go to the SACWA to find out if they do recognize your international course that you're doing, and that it's aligned with the South African course. Otherwise, you may not be able to claim that spend. So make sure that you do reach out to SACWA and that they double check to see if you can claim that spend as a recognizable spend. The YES program. The YES program is currently, it's where YES employees, you can claim up to 50% of the FNG spend, where we previously said that you can only claim 25% of yes, this will allow you to claim 50% of that spend. Sorry, I just got distracted there for a second. Yeah, so you can claim up to 50% of that spend and not just the 25% in that instance. Okay, thank you for the key principles.
All right, we will now go through the basic evidence that's required for verification purposes. Please note that this is just a general list, so your verification agency might ask for more or less of what has been listed, but what we have here is sort of like a guide of what documentation you need to prepare for verification purposes. So firstly, under general documents, we have a copy of your workplace skills plan, as well as your annual training report that has been submitted to your relevant SETA. That has to be accompanied by a letter received from the SETA approving the documents, okay? We then have the EMP 201 forms showing the SDL amounts that have been paid over to SARS, as well as a statement of account where you did have that SDL payment holiday, because you still need to show that that salary bill will be used when it comes to calculating your targets for what would have been your normal livable amount. You can also use the EMP 501 form if your financial period is aligned to the SARS financial period when you submit your EMP 501 form. Now, for sample programs, it will depend on the type or the category of the training spend, but typically what is required here would be a copy of the invoice for the training that has been conducted when it has been externally provided for, as well as the proof of payment for that particular service provider. You need to have your copies of your attendance registers or certificates that prove attendance for a particular course. You will need pay slips or copy of pay slips for the trainers that have conducted training when we look at your in-house informal training, since that rate or that hourly rate will be used for calculating what we deem as your training spend. Also, salary slips for any learners that have participated in learnerships, apprenticeships, as well as internships, because the salaries of those learners are fully recognized in terms of your skills development expenditure. Important again, when we look at the bursary indicator, you need to have a copy of that bursary agreement in place. You need to have a proof of registration for those learners that have enrolled with these higher education institutions, okay? We then need a proof of registration when it comes to learnerships, as well as proof of SETA accreditation for such learnerships, as well as agreements where you have apprentices as well as internships in place for the different learners. You will also need copies, our certified ID copies of the learners that have gone through the programs that have been sampled. Now, looking at the what we call gaps and tips, when it comes to the skills development element in particular. As I've mentioned before, during the lockdown period, there was that SDL payment holiday that was offered to different organizations. I can't even remember the actual periods, but that doesn't mean that you did not have a livable amount during those months, okay? So what verification agencies do, they actually would take your salary bill for those months and use that as what they would deem your leviable amount. So do not fall into the trap of a decreased amount when it comes to your particular targets for skills development expenditure. So like I said, this is how your leviable amount will be calculated. Then we have that SANA's change to the absorption target, where it is almost sort of like impossible to score your full 5 bonus points, right? So as much as SANA's is not really allowed to make such changes, but they did note that they have consulted with the DTIC when it comes to issuing out that statement, and hence it's been sort of like forced to verification agencies to measure the indicator that way. Okay, so a tip on how to sort of like make sure that you have all your ducks in a row when it comes to providing necessary documentation for your learnerships. We have realized that there has been quite a backlog with the different SETAs, and therefore causing a delay when it comes to getting the registration and approval of the learnerships from the SETA themselves. So we highly advise that you try to start the process as early as possible, maybe give it about a week or two in advance, so that when you come for your verification, you do not have to struggle with providing that proof to your VA. Another tip would be to focus on what we call strategic spending. There are different programs, like we say. Obviously the learning matrix has category A to G type of training, but there are some sort of like programs that would sort of add more to what would be recognized for your skills development expenditure. For instance, a learnership program can count towards more than one indicator on your scorecard. So we are looking at the actual expenditure where you will have paid for the course, as well as the salaries or stipends for those learners. We also have them contributing to the indicator where we look at the number of employees that are, or number of people participating in your category B, C, or D programs. So when you think about what courses to sort of like conduct for your employees or other unemployed people, be strategic about what programs would contribute more to your scorecard, right? And another tip would be to watch your spend relative to the EAP target. So you would have a certain budget, or you would want to aim for the targeted spend, but remember, it's very important that you spend it, or you allocate the spend to the right places, because you can easily still continue to have spend gaps, even though you have actually spent the right amount when it comes to the target that is your 6% of the leviable amount. But if it's not allocated to the right risk groups, you will then stand a chance of losing out some of the points. Okay. Also, to compare when it comes to joining the YES program to participate in order to increase your BE score level, just maybe have take some time to look at that cost versus improving or increasing your skills development budget, because sometimes it might turn out that you might sort of like gain more points by allocating that spend towards your skills development element, as opposed to spending the money to do the YES initiative. And then also just the tip on how you complete your verification claims. Remember to try and complete it as best as possible. VAs will only work with the information that you provide them. So if you miss out on any sort of like claimable spend, you will easily miss out on your points. So it's very important to keep records, appropriate records, so that when you go for verification, you ensure that you have claimed for as much as you can prove, or as much as you can provide evidence for. So that's one of our tips. And then the last one would be online training. So it tends to decrease the overhead costs. So just make sure that you have the proper evidence in place. Like we said, when it comes to verification, the proof is in the pudding. If you cannot provide that evidence, then you are losing out.
Okay, guys, I'm just sort of watching the time as well. So that brings us to the end of a very intense deep dive into skills development. We structure the webinars short for on purpose, actually. I'm going to see simultaneously if I can jump straight into the Q&As. Okay, I'm going to start with the chat questions, and then I'm going to pop over to the Q&As. I can see, I'll take the first one from Priya, asking if they can claim for POPI trainings to staff. So short answer is yes. Any education that is meant to transfer skills to Black employed and unemployed people can be claimed under skills development. So it's particular with POPI, you have to obviously adhere to the POPI regulation or the POPI Act. Of course, making sure to get the necessary validation and approval from those staff members to share information to the based on the claim sheet, so to Empowered, and then when you're submitting to the verification agency as well. Okay, Ofense and Kurt, can you guys see the questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can.
All right. So, okay, do you mind if I read the question, and then you guys can maybe just jump in straight away? Okay, second question. Under bursaries, what documents are required as proof for textbooks and accommodation?
So
normally, okay, you take it.
Yeah, so I just jumped on it because I was talking about the evidence. So there you will obviously need, so your proof would be a proof of payment and a slip if you will be claiming for those kind of expenditure. When it comes to verification itself, you need to provide proof. So that would be, you would need to keep like the slip for the textbook or the accommodation you are probably being invoiced, also accompanied by the proof of payment for that particular expenditure.
Okay, next question from Priya again. What about the cost of an LMS system?
I'll take this one. So LMS system can be claimed as overhead cost. You just need to make sure that you can justify the cost. So is there expense on that cost that you're paying on for that period? And the key thing is how you're going to distribute it between your staff members. So you can't just claim that cost and leave it. So normally what happens with overhead costs is you have to distribute it between the staff members that you have. So you have to look at your demographics and then distribute that amount between divided by your demographics to be able to claim it. So yes, you can claim that cost.
All right, cool. So that's all the questions on the chat block, and I've closed the chat block, so I'll spot it again before we leave, because I am very cognizant of the time. So for those of you who have to have a hard stop at 10:30, apologies. This recording or the session will be recorded and posted on our YouTube and our LinkedIn channel, so you're not losing out on anything if you are having to leave for the few minutes that we're running over. Okay, so the Q&As, there are 15 sitting at the moment. Nombuso, we appointed apprentices on a 12-month fixed-term contract as artisan assistants after their completion of the apprenticeship program. Does this qualify as absorption?
So absorption will qualify only if they get employed after they have completed the apprenticeship program. Also, make sure, okay, so if they are fixed-term contracts, it means that they were never really employees of the business prior to joining the program itself. So absorption will qualify as soon as they get employed by the business or anywhere in the industry, and you obviously need to provide proof for that in order for your bonus points to be awarded.
Okay. Then, as anonymous, is there a limit to the amount of training material spend?
So the training material spend will fall under the overhead cost limitation of 15%. So all of that accommodation, all of that will be limited to 15% of your total spend amount. So yes, there is a limit as to what you can recognize. You can spend all of the amounts, but at the limit that is recognizable, that's where you'll probably have a problem.
Okay. Sanile wants a copy of the presentation. So not necessarily the presentation that will be shared, but the recording will be posted on the channels, like I said, on social media. Janine from DSV, can you double count spend under bursaries and total spend, or only under one section? Kurt's smiling, he's ready to take it.
I'll take this one. Janine, no, you can't double count. It's bursaries will only be part of, you can only claim either under bursaries or under the total spend amount. You definitely can't double count. So yeah, there's no double dipping.
Okay, as a private in-house training provider also registered with DHET, but not a university, would we qualify for learnerships under bursary spend?
So learnership and bursary spend are two totally different things, right?
Yeah.
DHET, what would that be?
Minimum higher education.
Yeah. Oh, It is the big, yeah. So for as long as you're registered with the Department of Higher Education, you should be able to claim that spend as bursaries. But if you are conducting learnerships, then that's a totally sort of like different type of learning program.
Yeah, it's a different category. Courses that employees have to do for CPD points, what category will this fall into? So I'm not really sure what CPD is. All the acronyms catching the presenters off guard today. But so look, I think as Kurt mentioned when he was going through the key principles, as long as you have the learning program matrix in front of you and you can, pretty much take that training intervention and say, okay, is this the delivery mode? Is this the learning outcome? Is this the description? So as long as you can sort of tick those 4 boxes within a specific category, that's how you'd allocate this, training intervention within that category. The moment, and we generally find that the moment when you're sort of going through this exercise or, on delivery mode and description and the narrative, etc., you generally find quickly that it doesn't meet some boxes and, typically will fall into a specific category. I would, So maybe if that person who asked the question could just help me understand what CPD is, then we can try and help you figure out which category it does fall into.
Like it's continued professional development from my little sources.
She did a quick Google search. Yeah, I mean, so again, I think maybe the more of the key factor for me when like deciding which category would be the learning outcome, because that's quite like definite. So if they're getting, like the credits or whatever the case is, it would be like an E. If there's no formal outcome, it would be like an F and G depending on the delivery mode. And so that's where, maybe use the learning outcome as the first tick box that you're checking. And then by way of elimination, go through the rest of the categories. All right, next question. Under bursaries, what documents are required as I feel like we are. We did ask that. Sorry, that was a duplicate. Okay. Prasheen, are we allowed to claim spend on training that is not accredited?
Yeah, you are allowed to claim spend that is not accredited. That will normally fall under your F&G categories, and that will have a 25% limitation on that spend. Yep.
Janine, again, who do you count head? Maybe how she meant how? How do you count head count for learnerships? Only in year 1 or in both years if the learner runs over 2 financial years?
They do allow you when a learnership overlaps because you would still have them as unemployed learners in both periods. So normally it does count. The verification agencies would not sort of like penalize you for not having a learnership program running exactly as the same as your measurement period.
Okay, Prasheen, again, just want to confirm that I've heard correctly. We can't claim for training that is required as per legislation. For example, training for health and safety cannot be claimed.
That depends on the criteria that has been set out in the legislation, right? So you need to make sure that you understand the legislation, the requirements, and then be able to claim that. You always also need to check with your verification agency, as they just blanket certain training as being mandatory, and they don't even look at what the criteria is, and they just stop you from claiming it. So just run past your verification agency for confirmation as to what you can claim, but if it's legislative, you can't claim it.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, just because the question is coming up again, for certain clients who have access to Empowered, of course, I would suggest reaching out to your dedicated account manager and showing them maybe the specific, mandatory training intervention that you're referring to, so that we can help go and dig within that industry and help, decide or define whether that's going to be included in the claim or not. Okay. Okay, now the anonymous, please clarify on the capped spend for catering, food, accommodation, overhead, international training, and yes. Okay, so there's no cap on international training and yes per se. So the international training is just any training that's held outside of South Africa need to align to SAQA requirements. So there's not really a cap on it. And for yes, I mean, again, yes has got its variations of prerequisites as well, but I wouldn't regard that as a cap. So with regards to caps for catering, food, accommodation, and overhead, as Kurt mentioned, they carry a 15% in the amended codes of good practice. Sometimes in the charters, sector charters, you might have a different percentage. But 15% more or less is what you are looking at from an overhead perspective. Okay, please clarify the change to the absorption target and why it's impossible to claim all the bonus points now.
I'll explain that one.
Yes.
So yeah, previously what we were used to, or what we were following, right, in terms of your absorption target, it would be purely based on the number of unemployed learners that have completed the program within your measurement year. So if you had, say, 10 learners, for instance, and all 10 learners had joined the company based on joining the program, they are deemed as unemployed learners. Should they then get absorption, all 10 of them, you would easily get your full 5 bonus points regardless, right? But now that target has sort of like been clarified to be, your target is actually based on 5% of your head count. So not necessarily the number of unemployed learners that have completed, but 5% of your total head count, so the number of employees. So hence I said previously that it sort of like forces you to make sure that when you look at number of people participating in those programs, you will then need to ensure that 5% of your total head count are either fixed term employees or unemployed learners that you can then absorb, because in this case, absorption means permanent employment. So it has come to be somehow impractical for most companies to actually hit that target. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. With online training, do we still need a register signed by each participant, or could we use the calendar invite as proof? So I believe that you would still require some sort of signed acknowledgement from the staff member. I mean, you know, a calendar invite can be accepted, not necessarily means that that person showed up for the training. And so, yes, you could use the calendar invite as supplementary evidence, but I would definitely advise that you maybe just ask the employees or the unemployed staff to maybe just sign an acknowledgement saying that they had received this training on this date, you know, at no cost to them, or whatever the case was. Can we claim for courses that I only accredited, I think meant are, that are only accredited by the university under category A? So, I mean, so category A, I would imagine, again, stick to the learning program matrix. So category A as defined, as long as you're meeting the description, you're meeting the delivery mode, you're meeting the learning site, and you're meeting the learning outcome, you should justifiably claim that under category A contributions. That doesn't, I wouldn't say that only definitely as a hard rule means accredited university courses. There could be other educational institutions that could offer the same sort of category, you know, bursary typed learning interventions. So I wouldn't say, so yeah, I wouldn't say a hard no, is essentially what I'm trying to say. Okay, and then our training department operates as a service provider to the business. What is the best way of claiming training officers' salaries? Note, training officers only train a single occupational level, not the entire organization. And then the second part of the question is, if we purchase bulk material, how can the cost be cascaded to race and gender of beneficiaries?
Okay.
But so part two of that is you can look at the training initiatives themselves and then look at the race and gender of that, and then the proportion, the spend in that, or you can just use it as a full amount, your total bulk material spend, and then proportion that to your total population size. So you can look at that. For the first question, you're asking, what is the best way to claim it? So you can either claim the training salaries as an overhead cost and not claim category G for your training officers if they've done the training, or you can claim them for the individual training that they've done. So you need to then look at which one will better suit you and where you can score the most points. It's both is currently limited to 15%. or FNG is not limited to 15%, but to 25%, whereas your trading salary is now limited to 15%. So that might play a factor in your decision.
Empowered appreciates your time, and the poll has awarded the next month's webinar to focus on bonus points and enhancers across the entire BE scorecard. So if that sounds like something that will float your boat, then you can subscribe and join for the next month's webinar as well. Other than that, have a lovely rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you soon.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.